It's July 12th, 1979, and the Chicago White Sox are set to play the Detroit Tigers in the second game of a doubleheader. The baseball park had a capacity of 44,000 people, but that night, 55,000 spectators showed up. This event is remembered not because of the game, but because of what happened right before it. It was Disco Demolition Night.
The main attraction, the Disco Demolition, spearheaded by morning radio man Steve Dahl and his anti-disco army called the Insane Coho Lips.
Oh, that felt good.
Steve Dahl, a disco-hating radio DJ, thought it'd be hilarious to blow up hundreds of disco records in center field. Much to the dismay of those that approved this stunt, about 7,000 people bum-rushed the field, inciting a riot.
Many of the fans are scattering off the field now when they fight the police.
The baseball game never happened. This moment went down in history as the night disco died. But it didn't. Within just a few years, Chicago's youngest music producers and DJs would completely reinvent dance music by playing those disco records over hard-hitting electronic drum machines. In the city that disco died, it was reborn as house music, and within a decade, it would travel the globe. Frankie Knuckles, one of the godfathers of house, called it disco's revenge. In 1989, James Wiltshire was working in a record store in Manchester, England.
One Saturday, someone came in and just went, "I want the record that goes, wow!"
The song they wanted to hear was Right on Time by Black Box.
Gonna get up, gonna get up, gonna get up.
Obviously, in this clubber's mind, it was the most important record that they'd ever heard.
This happened at the tail end of an underground drug-induced movement in the UK, dubbed the Second Summer of Love.
Some very clever people suddenly realised that they could haul a massive sound system out into a field and get 20,000 paying punters to come and see it.
In 1989, Right on Time went from being an underground house hit to spending 6 weeks at #1 on the pop charts. By the end of the year, it was the best-selling single in the UK. Right on Time represents some of the genre's biggest influences. From the vocals and piano to the drums, each element of the song helps tell the story of how house music came to be.
Right on Time, Black Box, Top of the Pops 2, BBC 2, starting first song, now.
This is Black Box performing Right on Time on Top of the Pops, England's iconic music show. Despite what this performance might have you believe, this person isn't actually singing. She's lip-syncing to one of the most widely sampled disco records in house. Loleatta Holloway's Love Sensation. Loleatta Holloway was a gospel singer turned disco diva from Chicago. Her song Love Sensation was released just a few months after Disco Demolition. While the track itself fared pretty well, it's the a cappella released on the 12-inch single that Chicago DJs remixed over and over. And they didn't just do it in clubs. They did it on the radio. WBMX is a Chicago radio station that was home to a legendary group of DJs called the Hot Mix 5.
The Hot Mix 5 on WBMX, Chicago's #1 dance party.
Here's another Hot Mix on the 102.7 FM.
These DJs played a pivotal role in popularizing house music. From Ralphie Rosario.
This is Ralphie Rosario of Audio Talent Record Pool.
To Farley Jackmaster Funk.
With Farley Jackmaster Funk on 102.7 FM.
Through the 1980s, the Hot Mix 5 went from remixing disco records live on the air to playing original house music tracks that Chicago DJs produced. It's estimated that 1 million people in Chicago tuned into their show every Saturday night. Fans would record these programs on cassettes and share them around the world. That process is literally how I'm able to share this recording of Farley Keith remixing Love Sensation in 1984.
Sweet sensation, I can't find the words to say. You're such a hot temptation.
There's always been this association with big diva vocals and house music. So it's of no surprise to me that people went for some of the most powerful vocal samples that had come from the disco era, started chopping them out and piecing them back together.
By some estimates, Love Sensation was sampled nearly 300 times. And while DJs in Chicago likely started that trend, It was Right on Time that made Lolita's voice a house music staple.
Even the most die-hard, instrumental, techno-loving, vocal-hating snobs that I know within that scene still love that vocal.
What you're listening to is the kick drum of the Roland TR-909. If there's a defining instrument in house music, it's this drum machine.
It's a big, chunky, beige box with proper 80s livery all over it. You've got 16 buttons at the bottom, a series of controls for all of the actual different drum sounds.
The 909 was invented in 1983 by Iketaro Kakahashi, the founder of Roland Corporation.
This man gave us, probably by accident, machines that caused nothing but a revolution. The 909, or the 9 as lovers of it like to call it, is the successor to the 808.
You probably know the 808 as the drum machine that powers hip-hop. Kakahashi invented that too. Both used analog synthesis to generate sound, but the 909 was unique in that its cymbals and hi-hats were samples of real drums.
There's something in especially the open hi-hat that just whips the dance floor into a frenzy straight away. I mean, a kick is one thing, but it's really that certain you're like, yeah, that's a track.
As much as the 909 is really iconic today, back in 1984, it was deemed a commercial failure. Only 10,000 units were actually made.
When the producers were wanting to create this new type of electronic music in Chicago, most of them were broke, so they just went to the pawn shops to see what was available. And the one thing that was nearly always available was the poor 909 because it just hadn't sold very well. But it just so happened to have that particular perfect storm of the massive kick drum, the belting clap, the snare drum that you can do fantastic little rolls on, and those sloshy 4 or 5-bit cymbals and hi-hats.
That punchy sound of the 909 quickly permeated through Chicago and even Detroit, where bedroom producers were taking inspiration from house music and developing a genre called techno.
You can think of Larry Heard, Can You Feel It? You can think of Derek May, Strings Alive.
You can hear it in Jack Your Body, the first Chicago house music song to reach #1 in the UK. All the way to early house hits actually made in the UK, like Adamski's Killer.
If you take away the 909 from that, a lot of that thumping drive is gone.
It's no surprise then that in the opening few bars of Right on Time, you can hear that 909 kick drum and those crunchy hi-hats.
Gonna get up, gonna get up, gonna get up. Oh.
And then the piano started, and then it got interesting.
In the late 1980s, different house subgenres began to form. There was acid house, developed from the song Acid Tracks by Chicago producer Future. Its iconic sound came from the squelching bass line of a TB-303 synthesizer. There was deep house, which leaned heavily on soulful vocal samples and spacious synthesizers. And then there was Italo house, which more than any other offshoot relied on the upbeat rhythm of a digital piano. Right on Time is a classic Italo house track. So much so, there's a solo piano version of the song on the 12-inch single.
The Italians really knew how to do this mixture of great big pianos, and you add that kind of oversung diva element into that, and it became a staple.
In 1986, 3 years before Right on Time, Chicago's Marshall Jefferson released Move Your Body, dubbed the house music anthem. It's this song that helped establish how future house tracks would incorporate piano riffs.
The way pianos are used in house music is very much almost as a powerful rhythmic guitar.
Listen to the piano in Right on Time next to Move Your Body, and you'll immediately hear the similarities in rhythm. The musical exchange between Italy and Chicago might seem like